Sirens weren't flashing yet, but the tension in the cold marble lobby was already thick enough to choke on. A multimillionaire CEO stood with his hands raised, facing an officer who had already unclipped his handcuffs. Racism, power, and a catastrophic mistake were about to collide spectacularly. Rain lashed heavily against the floor-to-ceiling glass panes of the Zenith Tower in downtown Chicago. It was a miserable, freezing early morning, the kind of hour when the city finally surrendered to silence. Inside the sprawling, impeccably lit lobby, the atmosphere was a sterile mix of brushed steel and imported Italian marble. Darius Kane just wanted to grab a folder and go home. Darius was 39, the sole founder and chief executive officer of Kane Horizon, one of the most successful venture capital firms in the Midwest. He had just landed at O'Hare after a grueling long-haul flight from Tokyo, where he had spent days negotiating a complex tech acquisition. Jet lag pulled at his eyes, and a dull ache settled in his lower back. Wanting nothing more than a hot shower and his own bed, he had made a detour to the office. He needed the hard copy contracts locked in his private safe before the board meeting. Because it was the middle of the night, Darius had completely foregone his usual bespoke Tom Ford suits. He wore a faded gray Georgetown University hoodie, a pair of worn-in dark denim jeans, and comfortable white sneakers. His carry-on bag was slung over one shoulder. To anyone passing by on the street, he looked like a tired graduate student or a night shift courier. To the building's overnight security detail, he apparently looked like a threat. Darius walked past the empty main reception desk, his sneakers squeaking faintly on the polished floor. He bypassed the standard employee elevators and headed straight for the secluded alcove housing the executive lifts, the ones requiring a black-tier biometric keycard to even call the car. He had just unzipped his duffel bag to fish out his wallet when a sharp, authoritative voice echoed through the cavernous lobby. "Hey you, step away from the glass." Darius paused, his hand still inside his bag. He turned slowly to see a uniformed police officer striding purposefully across the lobby floor. The officer's hand was resting aggressively on his utility belt, right next to his radio. His posture was rigid, chest puffed out in a classic display of aggressive authority. "I said, step away from the elevator," the officer snapped, closing the distance. His name tag read R. Caldwell. Officer Rex Caldwell was working an off-duty security detail for the building, a common arrangement for city cops looking for extra overtime pay. He was a stocky man with a tight buzz cut and a perpetual scowl that suggested he viewed the world exclusively as a series of potential violations. Darius pulled his hand out of his bag, holding his leather wallet. He kept his movements deliberately slow and visible. "Evening, officer," Darius said, his voice calm, pitched in the low, resonant baritone that usually commanded boardrooms without him ever having to raise it. "I'm just heading up to my office to grab some files. I'll be out of your hair shortly." Officer Caldwell stopped a few feet away, his eyes raking over Darius's casual attire, lingering with obvious disdain on the faded hoodie. His lips curled into a skeptical sneer. "Your office? Right. Look, buddy, I don't know how you slipped past the exterior doors, but the loading dock is closed, and deliveries don't come through the front. It's the middle of the night." "I'm not a delivery driver," Darius replied, maintaining his polite tone. He knew exactly what was happening. He had lived as a black man in America long enough to recognize the sudden, sharp shift in the air, the instantaneous presumption of guilt. "I work here. I'm going up to the 60th floor. Caldwell let out a harsh, disbelieving laugh. "The 60th floor? You've got to be kidding me. That's the penthouse suite. Kane Horizon. That whole floor belongs to the investment firm." "I am well aware of who occupies the floor," Darius said quietly. He opened his wallet and pulled out his black-tier keycard, holding it up. "If you'll just let me scan this, I'll be on my way." Caldwell's hand shot out, snatching the keycard from Darius's fingers with unnecessary force. The officer examined the sleek, unmarked black card, his frown deepening. "Where did you get this? This is an executive master pass." "I got it from the building administration when I leased the floor," Darius explained, his patience beginning to fray at the edges, though his face remained a mask of stoic composure. "Cut the crap," Caldwell growled, his voice dropping to a menacing register. He unclipped his radio. "You expect me to believe a guy dressed like a street thug belongs in a multi-million-dollar executive suite? You either stole this card or you found it dropped on the street. Now, I need your government ID right now, and keep your hands where I can see them." Darius sighed, a slow, weary sound. He reached into his wallet again and extracted his Illinois driver's license. He handed it over. Caldwell snatched it, shining his heavy tactical flashlight directly onto the plastic, and then deliberately flashed the blinding beam right into Darius's eyes. Darius didn't flinch. He just stared back through the harsh light. Darius Kane. Caldwell read the name aloud, mispronouncing the last name slightly. He looked at the address. It was a sprawling estate in the affluent suburb of Lake Forest. Caldwell snorted. "Lake Forest? Yeah, okay. A fake ID to go with a stolen keycard. You guys are getting bold. I'll give you that." "Officer Caldwell," Darius said, his voice dropping a fraction of an octave, losing the polite deference, and adopting the cold, absolute authority he reserved for hostile negotiations. "That is my real ID. That is my real address. And this is my building. Now you can either call the building manager, Loretta Vance, and ask her to verify who I am, or you can give me my property back and step aside." Caldwell's face flushed a deep, angry red. He hated being spoken to with authority, especially by someone he had already categorized as a criminal. He dropped the flashlight down, his other hand instinctively drifting toward his handcuffs. "You don't give me orders, boy. You're trespassing in a restricted commercial property in possession of stolen security credentials and presenting forged identification. Turn around and put your hands flat against the marble wall. Now." The lobby was dead silent save for the faint, rhythmic drumming of the rain against the exterior glass. Darius did not move. He stood his ground, his eyes locked onto Officer Caldwell. He had dealt with aggressive, small-minded men before, but usually across a mahogany table with millions of dollars on the line. The stakes here were different, visceral, and dangerously unpredictable. "I am not turning around, and I am not putting my hands on the wall," Darius stated evenly. "If you lay a hand on me, Officer Caldwell, I promise you, the ensuing legal and financial consequences will fundamentally alter the trajectory of your life." It was a bold statement delivered with an icy calm that momentarily threw Caldwell off balance. The officer hesitated, his hand hovering over his cuffs. Suspects usually yelled, ran, or complied out of fear. They rarely stood perfectly still and threatened him with litigation using perfect diction. But Caldwell's ego quickly overtook his caution. He took a step forward, invading Darius's personal space, his chest almost bumping into Darius's shoulder. "Are you resisting arrest?" Caldwell demanded, his voice thick with anticipation, almost hoping for a physical altercation to justify his next move. Darius took a slow, deep breath. He realized that if he pushed back physically or even raised his voice, Caldwell would use it as an excuse to escalate to violence. He needed to dismantle this man's power trip completely, methodically, and undeniably. "No," Darius said smoothly. "I am not resisting. In fact, I want to fully cooperate with your investigation into this alleged break-in." Caldwell blinked, caught off guard by the sudden shift in demeanor. "Excuse me? You think I stole this keycard to break into the Kane Horizon offices?" Darius continued, his tone dangerously polite. "If it's stolen, the card's internal security chip will have been flagged by the system, and it won't call the elevator. Even if it does call the elevator, it won't bypass the secondary biometric scanner at the penthouse doors. Why don't we test your theory? Take me up. Escort me yourself. If the card doesn't work, or if the doors don't open, you can arrest me right there in the elevator. On that, sorry." Caldwell narrowed his eyes, his mind working through the proposal. He looked at the executive elevator bank, then back at Darius. The cop's lips twisted into a cruel, triumphant smile. He thought Darius was bluffing, trying to buy time, or hoping the system was glitchy enough to let him escape. "You want to play games?" Caldwell sneered, tossing the black keycard back at Darius. It hit Darius's chest and clattered to the floor. "Pick it up. Go ahead. Swipe it. But I'm warning you. The second that alarm trips, you're going face down on the floor, and I won't be gentle." Darius calmly bent down, retrieved his keycard, and turned to the sleek, buttonless black panel beside the elevator doors. He tapped the card against the glass reader. A soft chime echoed through the alcove. The LED strip surrounding the elevator frame shifted from a solid, restrictive red to an inviting, luminous blue. Ding! The brushed steel doors slid silently open, revealing a luxurious wood-paneled interior. Caldwell's expression faltered for a fraction of a second, but he quickly recovered. "Lucky break. Found a card they haven't deactivated yet. Get in." Darius stepped into the elevator, moving to the back corner. Caldwell followed closely, keeping his hand near his belt, his eyes darting around the confined space. Once the doors closed, Darius reached out and pressed his thumb against a glowing biometric pad beneath the floor buttons. The scanner flashed green, and the elevator immediately began its rapid, silent ascent to the 60th floor. The ride felt endless. The tension inside the car was suffocating. Caldwell stood awkwardly, trying to maintain his intimidating posture, but the sheer opulence of the private elevator seemed to dwarf him. He stared at the digital floor indicator as the numbers climbed dizzyingly fast. "You know, you people always think you're smarter than you are." Caldwell broke the silence, his voice echoing slightly in the small space. "You think you can fast-talk your way into a high-end suite, grab some laptops, maybe some petty cash, and walk out. I've been working the downtown beat for years. I know a scam when I see one." Darius didn't look at him. He kept his eyes fixed on the doors. "Is that right?" "You people, don't try to twist my words into some race thing," Caldwell scoffed defensively. "I mean criminals, con artists. We'll see who the con artist is in a few seconds." Darius replied softly, "We'll see." Ding. Floor 60, the penthouse. The heavy steel doors slid open. The view that greeted them was nothing short of breathtaking. The Kane Horizon reception area was a vast, open-concept space bathed in the warm glow of ambient lighting. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a stunning panoramic view of the Chicago skyline, rain streaking across the glass, distorting the city lights into a watercolor painting. Directly opposite the elevators, mounted on a massive slab of imported black marble, were the words Kane Horizon in brushed silver lettering. Caldwell stepped out first, his flashlight drawn again, sweeping the empty, immaculate space. He was looking for shattered glass, overturned desks, any sign of forced entry. But everything was perfect. "All right," Caldwell barked, turning back to Darius, who was casually stepping out of the elevator. "Game's over. Put your hands on your head." Before Darius could respond, a side door down the main hallway swung open. A man walked out, rubbing his eyes and carrying a stack of thick legal binders. It was Grant Ellison, the firm's chief legal counsel and one of Darius's oldest friends. Grant was a tall, sharply dressed man in his 50s, currently looking disheveled from pulling an all-nighter, finalizing the Tokyo merger documents. Grant froze, staring at the bizarre scene in the lobby. His CEO, dressed in a faded hoodie, being held at flashlight point by an aggressive, red-faced cop. "Darius," Grant said, his voice laced with absolute bewilderment. "What the hell is going on here?" Caldwell whipped around, shining his flashlight at Grant. "Stay right there. Who are you? Are you with him?" Grant squinted against the glare, his shock quickly morphing into furious indignation. He dropped the binders onto a nearby glass table with a loud thud. "Get that damn light out of my face, officer. I am Grant Ellison, chief legal counsel for this firm, and you are currently pointing a weapon at the owner of this company." Caldwell froze. The flashlight beam trembled slightly in his grip. He looked from Grant's tailored suit to Darius's faded hoodie, the gears in his mind grinding to a violent, catastrophic halt. "Owner," Caldwell managed to croak out, the word tasting like ash in his mouth. Darius stepped fully into the light of the reception area, his posture straightening, his presence suddenly filling the massive room. The tired graduate student vanished, replaced entirely by the formidable titan of industry. "Yes, Officer Caldwell," Darius said, his voice echoing like a gavel striking wood. "Welcome to my office." Silence descended upon the 60th floor, heavier and far colder than the storm raging outside the panoramic windows. The flashlight in Officer Rex Caldwell's hand suddenly seemed to weigh 100 pounds. Its beam dipped, hitting the polished hardwood floor, reflecting a fractured, shaky circle of light. Color drained entirely from Caldwell's face, leaving behind a sickly, pale hue that clashed with the aggressive red flush from just moments before. He looked from Grant Ellison, standing rigidly by the legal binders, back to Darius Kane. The faded gray Georgetown hoodie no longer looked like the uniform of a street-level trespasser, framed by the staggering wealth of the penthouse suite. It now projected the untouchable, effortless confidence of a man who owned the building. "I was just following standard security protocols," Caldwell stammered, the menacing gravel in his voice evaporating into a thin, defensive squeak. He instinctively took a half-step backward, finally unclipping his hand from his utility belt. He was uncooperative. He refused to explain his presence downstairs. Grant let out a sharp, humorless laugh that echoed off the imported marble walls. He adjusted his glasses, his exhaustion entirely replaced by a predatory legal focus. "Uncooperative. Officer, I have known Darius for years. He is physically incapable of raising his voice unless he is closing a merger. Do not stand in our headquarters and lie to my face. What is your badge number?" "Now, hold on a minute, sir." Caldwell tried to recover a shred of his shattered authority, puffing his chest out marginally. "It's the middle of the night. Your CEO comes walking in off the street looking looking the way he does. No suit, carrying a duffel bag. You can't blame a guy for doing his job." "Your job," Darius interjected, his voice slicing through the room with glacial precision, "is to secure the premises, not to racially profile the tenants, confiscate private property without cause, and threaten physical violence. You did not ask for clarification, Officer Caldwell. You demanded my identification, called it a forgery, claimed my biometric keycard was stolen, and threatened to throw me face down on the lobby floor." Caldwell swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing nervously. "I didn't mean it like that. I was establishing command presence. It's police training. It wasn't about race." "It is always about command presence until you realize you are commanding the wrong person," Darius replied evenly. He walked past Caldwell, completely ignoring the officer's proximity, and moved toward the sprawling mahogany reception desk. He tapped a sleek touchscreen panel embedded in the wood. The massive floor-to-ceiling glass wall behind the desk instantly transitioned from opaque to transparent, revealing a massive, dimly lit boardroom. "Grant," Darius said, not looking back, "call Loretta Vance. Wake her up. Tell her to get down here immediately. Then call the central precinct. Ask for the watch commander. Inform them that an off-duty officer working a private security detail is currently detaining the owner of Kane Horizon under threat of arrest." "I am not detaining you," Caldwell blurted out, panic finally breaking through his stubborn ego. "Look, Mr. Kane, there's been a misunderstanding, a huge misunderstanding. I apologize. Let's just chalk this up to a late-night security mix-up, all right? I'll head back down to the lobby. You guys do your work." Caldwell turned toward the elevator, desperate to escape the suffocating pressure of the room. "Stop right there," Grant barked, stepping into Caldwell's path. The lawyer was an inch taller than the cop, and right now he radiated absolute fury. "You are not leaving this floor. You initiated an unlawful detainment downstairs, and you escalated it by forcing my client into a confined elevator under duress. If you step into that elevator, I will personally ensure you are charged with kidnapping and false imprisonment before the night is over." "Kidnapping? Are you out of your mind?" Caldwell scoffed, though his eyes darted nervously toward the exit. "He agreed to come up here. I offered to prove my identity because you threatened to assault me if I didn't." Darius corrected him quietly, leaning against the reception desk. "There is a distinct legal difference, officer. One I am sure the Internal Affairs Bureau will be fascinated to explore." Caldwell glared at them, breathing heavily, realizing he was entirely trapped. "You have no proof of what happened downstairs. It's your word against mine. My body camera is charging in the security office. I was off duty." A tiny, almost imperceptible smile touched the corners of Darius's mouth. It was not a smile of joy, but the cold satisfaction of a trap snapping shut. "You assume," Darius said, tapping the touchscreen on the desk once more, "that because I am dressed casually, I am careless. Zenith Tower is a Class A commercial property, but Kane Horizon handles highly classified intellectual property and sovereign wealth funds. We don't rely on the building's lobby cameras." A massive 80-inch flat screen on the waiting area wall suddenly flickered to life. It displayed a grid of high-definition camera feeds. Darius tapped a button, and the screen maximized a feed showing the exact alcove of the executive elevators downstairs. The footage was pristine 4K resolution, and most importantly, it had a small pulsing audio waveform at the bottom. "Microphones?" Caldwell whispered, his face draining of whatever color had managed to return. Military-grade directional audio, Grant confirmed, crossing his arms. Legally installed, explicitly detailed in the building's lease agreement, and currently storing every word you said to Mr. Kane on an encrypted off-site server. We have your threats, your slurs, and your unprovoked aggression in flawless high definition. Caldwell stared at the screen, watching his own aggressive posture, hearing his own voice echo through the penthouse speakers. You expect me to believe a guy dressed like a street thug belongs in a multi-million-dollar executive suite? The reality of his situation crashed down upon him. He hadn't just insulted a rich man. He had handed a flawless, undeniable civil rights lawsuit to a billionaire who had his own legal department. A short time later, the atmosphere in the penthouse boardroom was suffocatingly tense. The storm outside continued to batter the glass, but inside, a different kind of tempest was reaching its climax. Captain Victor Langley, a longtime veteran of the Chicago Police Department with silver hair and a deeply lined face, sat at the head of the massive mahogany table. Beside him sat Loretta Vance, the general manager of Zenith Tower, who had arrived wearing a hastily thrown-on trench coat over her pajamas, looking utterly horrified. Officer Caldwell stood rigidly at attention near the doorway, stripped of his usual swagger, looking like a scolded child. Darius sat opposite the captain, a steaming cup of black coffee in his hands. Grant Ellison stood firmly behind Darius's chair, holding a tablet that had just finished playing the lobby security footage for the third time. The silence that followed the end of the video was deafening. Captain Langley rubbed his temples, letting out a long, exhausted sigh. He looked at Caldwell, his eyes filled with a mixture of disgust and deep disappointment. "Caldwell," Captain Langley started, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. "You have been on my roster for years. We have had multiple seminars, multiple briefings on de-escalation, bias training, and community relations. And yet I am sitting here watching you treat a prominent citizen like a vagrant because he happened to be wearing a sweatshirt." "Captain, he was lurking by the private elevators in the middle of the night," Caldwell pleaded, though his voice lacked conviction. "I asked for his ID and he handed me a license for a Lake Forest estate. It didn't add up." "It didn't add up to you," Loretta Vance interrupted, her voice shaking with anger. "Mr. Kane pays over $2 million a year to lease this space. He is the anchor tenant of my building. You were hired to protect this property, not to terrorize the people who own it. Zenith Tower is terminating our off-duty contract with you, effective immediately. You are permanently banned from this premises." Caldwell flinched as if physically struck. Losing the Zenith Tower contract meant losing thousands of dollars in easy overtime. "That's just the beginning, Rex," Captain Langley said grimly. He stood up, towering over the disgraced officer. "Hand over your badge and your service weapon right now." Caldwell's eyes widened in sheer panic. "Captain, please. I'll apologize. I'll take a suspension. Don't strip my badge." "You escalated a non-violent encounter based entirely on your own prejudice, threatened physical assault without provocation, and unlawfully detained a civilian." Langley listed the offenses with mechanical coldness. "You are stripped of police powers pending a full internal affairs investigation. Gun, badge, now." With trembling hands, Caldwell unclipped his heavy leather belt, placing his firearm on the boardroom table. He unpinned his silver star and set it next to the gun. The metallic clink echoed loudly in the quiet room. "Wait in my cruiser downstairs," Langley ordered. "Do not speak to anyone. Do not touch your phone." Caldwell looked at Darius one last time. There was no apology in his eyes, only the bitter, resentful glare of a man blaming the world for his own catastrophic mistakes. Without another word, he turned and walked out, the heavy glass doors swinging shut behind him. Captain Langley turned back to Darius, his posture softening slightly. "Mr. Kane, on behalf of the department, I am profoundly sorry. This is not the standard we uphold. If you choose to pursue formal civil charges, you will face no friction from my precinct. We will provide any documentation your legal team requires." "Thank you, Captain," Darius said softly, placing his coffee cup down. "Grant will be in touch with the city's legal department by tomorrow. We will be pursuing this to the fullest extent of the law, not for a payout, but to ensure that man never wears a badge in this city again." Langley nodded slowly, understanding the gravity of the promise. "I don't blame you, sir. Have a good night, considering." The captain gathered Caldwell's weapon and badge. escorting a visibly shaken Loretta Vance out of the suite. When the doors finally closed, leaving just Darius and Grant alone in the sprawling office, the silence returned, thick and exhausting. Grant placed a hand on his friend's shoulder. "Are you all right, Darius?" Darius looked down at his faded gray hoodie, tracing the worn fabric near the pocket. He had built an empire from nothing. He commanded boardrooms, moved markets, and employed thousands. Yet in the eyes of a man with a badge and a bias, all of his achievements, his wealth, and his character were entirely invisible, eclipsed by the color of his skin and the casual clothes on his back. "I'm fine, Grant," Darius whispered, though his jaw remained tightly clenched. "I just came here to get my files." He stood up, walking past the breathtaking view of the Chicago skyline, heading toward the private safe in his inner office. The storm outside was finally beginning to break, but Darius knew all too well that some storms, the quiet, insidious ones built on prejudice and assumptions, never truly passed. They just waited in the lobby. Did this story of power, prejudice, and instant karma keep you on the edge of your seat? Real power doesn't need to shout, and true character is revealed when the masks fall away. If you love this dramatic twist and want more intense, real-life inspired stories of justice being served, smash that like button right now. Don't forget to share this with your friends and subscribe to the channel so you never miss our next thrilling upload.